George Edward Armstrong's story has all the makings of a modern-day sports legend, except it blossomed in an era when TV was black and white, players traveled on rickety buses, and social media was decades away from being invented. Imagine starting life in the quiet stretches of Sked, Ontario, far removed from the big city lights and colossal stadiums, surrounded by nature's embrace and a supportive family whose athletic passions shaped an unexpected path to hockey stardom. George was born on July 6, 1930, to a father of Irish-Canadian descent and a mother of Algonquin Anishinaabe heritage, creating a truly unique blend of cultural identities that seemed to hint at the trailblazer he would become. His father, a soccer player, and his mother, a skilled canoeist, loved sports so much that they encouraged George to explore his own interests, even though his earliest attempts at skating were, by all accounts, less than stellar. Legend has it that his father believed George's struggles on the ice were the lingering result of a bout of spinal meningitis that hit him at just 6 years old. It's quite the visual. Young George, shaky on his skates, falling repeatedly, only to rise again because he had something to prove. And prove it he did, transforming that early disadvantage into an iron will that would carry him through a career spanning over 2 decades in professional hockey. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves just yet. Growing up in Falconbridge, Ontario, George learned resilience and tenacity in a hard-working community that celebrated perseverance. Hockey wasn't just a pastime. It was an expression of identity, a unifying force that brought neighbors together to cheer on local heroes and dream about bigger arenas. But George's path to Maple Leaf stardom was anything but straightforward. He dropped out in the 11th grade to dedicate himself fully to hockey, a bold gamble that many might have questioned at the time. Yet, sometimes you have to take a leap of faith when you feel your calling is beckoning from the rink. And that leap of faith took George to the Toronto Marlboros, a revered junior organization where countless legends got their start. It was here that Armstrong proved his father wrong about his skating abilities, emerging as not just a decent skater, but a premier playmaker who led the Ontario Hockey Association in assists and points during the 1947-48 season. That performance earned him the Red Tilson Trophy for the OHA's Most Outstanding Player, a remarkable achievement for someone who once had trouble remaining upright on the ice. Armstrong's success in junior didn't happen by luck. Stories from his Toronto Marlboros days describe a young man who was fiercely competitive yet humble, someone who'd skate the extra mile if it meant setting up a teammate for a game-winning goal. His dedication paid off again in 1949-50 when he captained the senior Marlboros and lit up the league scoreboard with a mind-boggling 64 goals, an OHA record at the time. And if one Red Tilson Trophy wasn't enough to silence skeptics, he grabbed the award yet again for that season, cementing his reputation as one of the most promising talents outside the NHL. It's hard not to imagine the sense of pride his parents must have felt, seeing the boy who once wobbled like a newborn calf on skates now dominating opponents and leading leagues in scoring. One can almost picture the celebratory dinner at home in Falconbridge, with father and mother beaming and George wearing that unassuming grin. If you're intrigued by the man's unstoppable scoring abilities, you'll be even more enthralled by the cultural significance woven into his journey. During the 1950 season, while playing for the Marlboros, Armstrong visited the Stoney Reserve in Alberta. The people there recognized his Algonquin Anishinaabe heritage and presented him with a ceremonial fur hat, bestowing upon him the name Big Chief Shoot the Puck. The moniker eventually got shortened to Chief, and it stuck with him for life. In an era that wasn't always the most welcoming to players of Indigenous descent, Armstrong embraced his roots, proud of the heritage that blended seamlessly with his Irish-Canadian lineage. He carried that pride onto the ice, eventually becoming the first player with Indigenous heritage to score a goal in the NHL, an accomplishment that paved the way for future players who might otherwise feel overlooked or marginalized. Armstrong later used his platform to support programs that promoted positive role models for Indigenous youth, never forgetting where he came from and the power that representation holds. But before Armstrong made it into the NHL record books, he had to cut his teeth in the minor leagues with the Pittsburgh Hornets, an affiliate of the Toronto Maple Leafs during the 1951 season. In 71 games, he recorded 15 goals and totaled 48 points, a solid debut that caught the attention of Maple Leafs management. Even then, his coaches noted his relentless drive and willingness to grind in the corners for pucks. He wasn't just a flashy scorer. He put in the gritty work, the kind of effort that endears a player to teammates and fans alike. Sure enough, he got called up to Toronto in 1951-52, and in a moment that could have come straight from a movie script, he netted his first NHL goal against Jerry McNeil of the Montreal Canadiens. It may have been just a single goal in a rookie campaign, but historically, it was massive. The first NHL goal scored by a player of Indigenous heritage. That piece of trivia alone could have been enough to secure Armstrong a small footnote in NHL history. But the story was just beginning to unfold. From the 1952-53 season onward, Armstrong became a mainstay on the Leafs roster, quickly earning a reputation for being, in the words of many observers, consistent, hard-working, and dogged. Some teammates had more colorful adjectives to describe him, like tenacious and tireless. He wasn't the fastest skater or the most theatrical talent, but he was unflinching in his determination, taking on whatever role needed to be filled on a given night. That versatility made him an asset in any scenario, from killing penalties to orchestrating key plays in tight games. It wasn't long before the Maple Leafs brass took notice of not just his on-ice abilities, but also the way he carried himself behind the scenes. By the 1957-58 season, Armstrong was named team captain, a role he would hold for an astonishing 13 seasons. Think about that for a moment. 13 seasons wearing the C on the chest in one of hockey's most pressure-packed markets, Toronto, a city that eats, sleeps, and breathes the sport, analyzing every shift as if it were a life-or-death situation. Maple Leafs owner Conn Smythe famously declared that Armstrong was the best captain the Leafs ever had, and that is high praise from a man who had seen his share of icons skate through the old Maple Leaf Gardens. The honor of captaincy wasn't just about leadership in the locker room, though that was significant. It signaled a trust that Armstrong would motivate a proud franchise with a storied history, a franchise that demands excellence, given the weight of countless fans' dreams riding on every game. As captain, Armstrong was known for having zero tolerance for players who gave anything less than their best. If you took a lazy shift, you would feel the captain's quiet but piercing disapproval. He led by example, shifting the culture and solidifying his status as the spiritual compass of the team. Perhaps most memorably, Armstrong led the Maple Leafs to 4 Stanley Cup championships, 1962, 1963, 1964, and 1967. Every championship has its key moments and heroes, but Armstrong managed to imprint himself on at least 2 of those cup runs in ways that fans still talk about decades later. In 1962, he initiated the sequence that resulted in the cup-winning goal, demonstrating that a perfect pass or a strategic forecheck could be as crucial as netting the puck yourself. But it was in 1967, at the tail end of the NHL's original 6 era, where Armstrong authored a moment that would etch his name into hockey lore. In the 6th game of the Stanley Cup Final against the Montreal Canadiens, with the Leafs clinging to a late lead, Armstrong scored into an empty net to seal both the championship and the end of an era. That goal proved to be the last ever scored in the original 6 format, marking a bittersweet, close to a chapter in NHL history. While Toronto fans erupted in euphoria over their 13th Stanley Cup victory, no one knew then it would be their last for over half a century. Even so, the captain's final goal stands as a symbolic turning of the page between old-time hockey and the modern expansions that would soon follow. Over 21 NHL seasons, all with the Maple Leafs, Armstrong logged an incredible 1,188 regular season games. Some sources say 1,187, but we'll go with the officially recognized figure. No Maple Leaf in franchise history had played that many games when he retired, and it stood as a club record. During that time, he amassed 296 goals, 417 assists, and 713 points. At the moment he hung up his skates in 1971, his 713 points were second highest in the franchise's record book, and as of 2014, he still ranked 5th. Among all Maple Leafs right wingers, he remains the leader in games played, assists, and total points. He also appeared in 7 NHL All-Star games, further proof that his skill set was respected throughout the league. Yet beyond the numbers, Armstrong embodied an ethos of teamwork and sportsmanship. He was the kind of player who might hit you in the corner to gain control of the puck, then pick you up off the ice if you were slow to get up. That blend of ruggedness and respect was a hallmark of hockey's golden years, and Armstrong wore it as naturally as he wore the C. Retirement didn't slow Armstrong down. It simply nudged him into a new phase of his hockey life. In July 1972, he returned to the Toronto Marlboros, this time behind the bench as head coach for the junior-level team. Coaching wasn't necessarily his dream job. He reportedly preferred scouting, but he took on the challenge with a level of determination equal to his playing days. And wouldn't you know it, he guided the Marlboros to 2 Memorial Cup championships in 1973 and 1975, reaffirming his knack for leading young players to their fullest potential. The Ontario Hockey League recognized his impact by naming him Coach of the Year for the 1972-73 season. It's almost poetic how Armstrong's professional journey came full circle, returning to the very organization that shaped him as a youth, and helping another generation of juniors chase their own big dreams. Around a decade later, Armstrong found himself once again in the Maple Leafs fold, this time serving as an assistant general manager and scout. If you think about it, scouting suited him perfectly. He possessed an unmatched eye for effort, heart, and raw skill. He knew what it took to be a Maple Leaf: the discipline, the sacrifice, the capacity to shoulder the city's sky-high expectations. In the 1988-89 season, when the head coach position needed a fill-in, Armstrong stepped up to guide the team for part of the season. Though it was a brief stint, it added another chapter to his saga as a Leaf through and through, capable of wearing practically any hat, from player to captain to coach to scout. After that, he returned to scouting duties and maintained this role for the rest of his life, living proof that once you find your calling, you never truly retire. Of course, a career of Armstrong's magnitude does not go unnoticed, and the honors and accolades piled up over the years. In 1975, he was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, recognized among the sport's true greats. In 2010, the Ontario Sports Hall of Fame also enshrined him, shining a light on the remarkable journey that began in the small town of Skeed. The Maple Leafs had already honored Armstrong in 1998 by honoring his number 10 sweater, but they took it one step further on October 15, 2016, when they officially retired the number alongside 10 other legendary Leafs. During that ceremony, fans, former players, and coaches paid their respects to a man whose leadership spanned multiple eras and helped define what it means to be a Maple Leaf. Sportsnet later ranked him the 14th greatest Maple Leaf of all time, which might be underselling him if you ask certain diehards who saw him play. Armstrong's legacy isn't just limited to trophies and record books. In 1969, he was the inaugural recipient of the Charlie Conacher Humanitarian Award for his charity efforts, underlining how his influence transcended the rink. He spent much of his life in Leaside, a Toronto neighborhood, where he'd often be seen riding bikes with his family, another testament to how down-to-earth he remained, despite his considerable fame in a hockey-mad city. He and his wife Betty raised 4 children, encouraging them to pursue their passions just as his parents had done for him. He also extended that familial guidance to his nephews, Dale McCourt and Dan McCourt, both of whom left their own marks on professional hockey, Dale as the first overall pick in the 1977 NHL draft, Dan as an NHL linesman who officiated over 1,700 games. That's quite the family tree for one household, bridging multiple facets of the sport over several decades. Speaking of carrying the torch, Armstrong's granddaughter, Callie, followed in her grandfather's footsteps on the ice. She captained the Harvard Crimson women's hockey team, then founded Armstrong Hockey, an initiative aimed at providing opportunities for Indigenous youth, especially girls, to develop their hockey skills and confidence. The program stands as a living tribute to George Armstrong's pride in his Indigenous heritage and the importance of role models. The idea that a young player from a remote or underrepresented community might be inspired to pick up a stick because of Armstrong's legacy feels like a fitting continuation of the Chief nickname he once received in Alberta. Indeed, it's an ongoing testament that a star's influence can ripple far beyond the era in which he played. Armstrong's life wasn't confined entirely to the rink and the front office. In 1971, He had a cameo in a hockey-themed film called Face Off, also known as Winter Comes Early. Though it never became a cinematic masterpiece, the movie let Armstrong dip his toe into acting, if only briefly, and gave fans another angle from which to view his multifaceted talents. It also further cemented his status as a Maple Leafs icon, someone the film industry felt was worth featuring, even if only for a fleeting moment on camera. All heroes eventually face life's final whistle. On January 24th, 2021, George Edward Armstrong passed away at the age of 90 due to heart-related complications. The Maple Leafs and the hockey world at large paused in unison, reflecting on the significance of a figure who had been part of the franchise for the better part of 7 decades. Tributes poured in from former teammates, coaches, players he'd scouted, fans who remembered his goals in the 60s, and younger fans who had only heard tales about the stoic captain who lifted the cup in 1967. The remembrance posts, documentaries, and interviews that followed his passing painted a portrait of a man, as gracious as he was, determined. True to his roots, his ashes were laid to rest beside his mother in Sked, Ontario, where the whole saga first began. In that moment, you can imagine a sort of cosmic circle closing, the small-town boy with big dreams returning to his childhood home after forging an unparalleled legacy in the hockey universe.